All right, are you ready for the next talk at Clojure South 2025? All right, awesome. Sounds like you are all enjoying your conference so far. I love it. All right, speaking of conference, I have a question. Has anybody here met anybody at the conference who said that Clojure was their first programming language? Anybody meet anybody like that? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wow, you all need some help, so I'm going to help you out today. Hello, my name is Wendy Randolph, and I chose Clojure as my first programming language. You may know me from other conferences like Clojure Conj or Heart of Clojure, ElixirConf, Lambda Days, or the awesome online learning community for Clojure, Clojure Camp. So today, if it wasn't already obvious, I'm going to talk to you today about Clojure and Elixir, two languages that are near and dear to my heart. Oh, too fast. All right, so who here works with Clojure? All right, a lot of folks, all right. How about Elixir? All right, smaller yay, all right, I see you, awesome. All right, who works with web apps? All right, web app people, all right. Nice mix of experience in the room, love to see it. So whether you come from Clojure or Elixir, I hope that you find a little nugget today that you're going to explore a little further in the future. All right, one more show of hands, and then I'll leave you alone. Does anybody know who this man is? Okay, I got one guy, all right. Well, I'll let you know, I got two, okay. He's like the American version of Hachino, okay? So he does the paternity tests, the lie detector tests, and his name's Maury Povich. However, he has nothing to do with this talk, except for letting me segue into letting you know that I lied on my abstract. But that's okay. So in my abstract, I gave a tall order. I was going to talk about two languages, Elixir and Clojure, and two different web apps that were related. So again, tall order for a 25-minute talk. So instead, what we're going to do is show a couple code examples from those related web apps, and then we'll do a light overview of the languages. Not a whole deep dive. It's going to be a very light overview, and then just something to whet your appetite for further exploration on your own. This app that I'm referring to is called Fabric Stash. It is a fabric inventory management system for people like me who like to sew and have a lot of fabric. So the Clojure version is a simple CRUD app, and I'm working on another version in Elixir and Phoenix. So like I said, Clojure was my first programming language, and some people thought that was a crazy idea. They thought I was crazy. They might have thought I was crazy for other reasons. But anyway, some people thought that was a smart idea. I wish I had learned Clojure earlier or first. That would have saved me so many headaches. Well, don't get me wrong, I did have some headaches, but that's because I was learning a lot of things all at once. I was learning Clojure along with programming in general, and Emacs, and Datomic, and learning how to build web apps. So yes, I admit, it was a lot all at once, but I survived. And I'm so happy that I started with Clojure as my first programming language. No regrets at all. Actually, now that I think about it, I've had time, and I see now that Clojure was shaping the way that I think about programming and problem solving. With the REPL-driven workflow, plus immutability, and pure functions, it gave me a way to interact with problems in an interactive way, step by step. And I have forgotten the next thing that I was going to say, so I'm going to sneak over here to my notes and see what the next thing that's awesome that I'm going to talk about. Oh yes, I was going to mention how the things about the REPL, immutability, pure functions, This, I think, is what makes it a great beginner language, even though it wasn't a popular choice that I heard among other people at the time. Then, of course, I did what a lot of Clojure devs do, or any dev in general. I went and got a job in a different language, and that brought me to Elixir, which has built upon the functional foundation that I had with Clojure, but then gave me new concepts, new things to think about in the ecosystem. I got exposed to the power of pattern matching and powerful tools like Phoenix, the Phoenix framework and LiveView and other tools that helped me feel productive quickly. And that's what I was going to say during this slide. So what was I doing with all this functional immutable power? Well, I had this goal. I wanted to build a web app. So if you don't know what a web app is, I also did not know. It's more than a website. It enables you to do transactions, interactions, complex tasks. And though from app to app there are differences, and language to language there are differences in how web apps are composed and thought about, they're basically solving the same problem. You take a request, you do something smart with it, and then you send off a response. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how each language ecosystem deals with that puzzle. But before I talk about the differences, I think we should talk a little about the things that are similar. I'm calling them functional friends, Clojure and Elixir. Because they're both functional programming languages, which is already a weird thing. So they have that in common. We love weird, right? Right. Gabby, that was your cue. There we go. And we have immutability at the core of each language. They're both symbiotic with an established platform as well. We can do metaprogramming in either one. They both have their own flavor of REPL-driven workflows. I do miss Clojure's REPL workflow a little bit these days, but that's okay. I do like enjoying what Clojure Elixir has to offer in that respect. They both have small core languages, and they have enthusiastic communities like you all. Yeah, that's what I like to hear. All right, so we can talk a little bit about the differences. First off, Elixir has a Ruby-like syntax. Clojure is a dialect of Lisp. And yes, I realize I have dark mode clips on a white background. That's just so I piss everybody off. And we can talk about the differences in concurrency models. Elixir's concurrency model comes from the actor model, which comes from OTP. The OTP is the Open Telecom Platform. That is the power layer that enables fault-tolerant and highly concurrent systems by default. For example, here, this is from my Fabric Stash app in Elixir and Phoenix and LiveView. I have an example of an upload function where I'm uploading an image. So each image has its own process. So it's safe and isolated for that file handling. And then, I also should mention the beam, which is where Elixir runs, which is the virtual machine for Erlang, which is now running, which now is used for Elixir. So each file is consumed in its own beam process. That virtual machine handles all these things under the hood while you write sequential Elixir. And then on the other hand, with Clojure, core async gives us simple building blocks to build asynchronous programs. One of those simple elements is the channel, which you can think of like a pipe, like I have here, Mario pipe, or a queue. Another simple element we have is our Go block, represented by this big black box, because it can be whatever you need it to be to run asynchronous. It's our machine, our process. So these are very simple things that, and just a few things in a core async, simple things that get put together to solve complex problems, to do concurrent work. Some work takes longer than others. Sometimes we need work given to a pipeline in a different order. the simple elements from core async can best manage that variability. So here, this is not from my web app, my Fabric web app. This is just a fake little scenario of what if we have a little web app for learning Clojure. A user can go submit an exercise for a project. He's laughing and I'm getting distracted. We let the user submit an exercise to be posted on the website maybe. So the app processes that request, processes that submission, and maybe it gets published. So in that simple example, we had 2 channels and our Go block. The Go block was our work that we take information from one channel, do something to it, and it goes out on another channel. And in my code example, we used a loop. So we're going to keep processing these exercises that are submitted, of course, unless someone mentions monads, and then it stops. Our process stops because apparently we don't talk about monads. Mas calma, tem mais. But wait, there's more. That's just very few things you can do with Clojure Async. And I'll just tell you a few more things that you can do just with channels. You can mix them, you can split them, you can read this long list of stuff I have on this page. There's a lot more than that, but I encourage you to look into core async if you haven't already, because there is so much that you can do towards concurrent processes. Alrighty, back to Elixir. I touched on earlier that Elixir runs on the Beam, which is the virtual machine for Erlang. So you can use all the standard library for Erlang, the tools, and take advantage of that OPT framework. And with Clojure, it's intentionally hosted in that it compiles to and runs on the runtime of another language, such as the JVM or the Java virtual machine. This is more than an implementation strategy. Numerous features ensure that programs written in Clojure can leverage and interoperate with the libraries of the host language directly and efficiently. And that's straight from the mouth of the author of Clojure, Rich Hickey. So besides all these awesome things, what really stood out to me between the 2 languages was the developer experience, especially as somebody who was new to programming. So like I said, Clojure was my first programming language, so that means I'm learning programming through the lens of Clojure, this whole new world of programming. And sometimes, even though I knew it was a whole new world, I still got surprised that I was learning things that I did not understand. And sometimes that made me frustrated, and I would bang my head against the desk or just stare at the screen for inordinate amounts of time. Turns out that's not very productive. So I started doing something that was more productive. I started singing and dancing to Disney music on my breaks. And you know what? It helped. Don't knock it till you try it, y'all. You gotta try it out. Or your own music. Get up and move and have fun. So this really helped me get out of that rut, get out of those learning frustrations where I felt stuck. Highly recommend it. If you want to hear more about that, you can check out my talk from last year's Conj called When Your Disney Playlist Saves Your Tech Career. Oh, and that is a natural, homegrown, what's it called? Typo there, that is not AI. That was all me, 100%. Proud of it, that's fine. All right, back to the languages. So with Elixir, Phoenix, and LiveView, when I learned that ecosystem, I also was learning all that all at once. So Phoenix, I gotta take a breath. How about we all take a breath? Everybody take a breath in. Let it out, feels good. All right, great. Phoenix is a server-side web framework. And LiveView is the library for the framework that enables rich, real-time, interactive web interfaces. And if you haven't noticed, I don't remember the next thing I was going to say, so I'm checking my notes. Thanks for bearing with me. Basically, things were feeling me go back here. Learning all this together, I saw how things seemed well integrated and easy, such as starting a new project. These 5-ish lines are all you need to start a new project. That's pretty simple. I could get going in just a few minutes, have an app running hooked up with a database. I could get right to writing app logic without thinking about, oh, what library do I need to use? How do I hook it up, etc. It was great. And then when I started with Clojure, I remember hearing about, oh, Clojure is so flexible. You can do anything with Clojure. Why would you want a framework? I don't understand. Well, yes, I do believe that Clojure is very flexible, but that comes with the great responsibility that you need to take the time to build that knowledge of finding out, what tool do I need? How am I going to do this? What should I use? And that flexibility kind of reminded me of myself and that I'm physically flexible. I will show you right now. That was mostly just an excuse to stretch and move. But I found out later in life, so I've been able to do that my whole life. And then later I found out, after an injury, that I actually have extra flexibility in my joints. And that's how I can do that. You know, you're nodding. So I'm injured because I have all this flexibility. I can do all these different things. But what I need is to build my muscles so I can better control my body. And as I was preparing for this talk, I thought, okay, I'm seeing a parallel with Clojure. Clojure, great flexibility. But you need to build your knowledge muscles in order to control and do what you want to do in your app. So in summary, what I found with Clojure was lots of options. Yes, you can tailor your stack exactly to your needs. Granted that you're ready to piece it together yourself and maybe be a little less guided than just being handed the training wheels of a framework. And then with Elixir, I found that deep integration of all this stuff working together seemed pretty seamlessly to me as far as what I was doing, really supported me as a newer developer. Though I found that sometimes there were fewer third-party libraries available. So some people come to Elixir, Phoenix, and LiveView because they want to get away from this traditional stack, these multiple layers, maybe fragile wiring, duplicated logic. Because this might scare some people, and it probably will because it's a group full of Clojure people. In LiveView, we wrap up a bunch of stuff into a process. Yeah, I see somebody cringing already. So your UI, your events, validation, modals, state, it's all wrapped up in a process. But don't be too scared because that process is supervised, restartable, and isolated. I know some of you are still scared, but that's okay. So here, the server is going to re-render just changed parts of the DOM. And there's going to be no page reload or client-side JS. When this fabric, like I saved fabric in this event, when that fabric is saved, the LiveView process is going to update the local state, and then bam, your UI updates are live in real time. Again, the LiveView process, the LiveView is an Elixir process that's supervised and isolated. And that LiveView really does feel like magic until it does not. And then you need to go digging. And it really helped me in the beginning to make sure you have a mental model of this life cycle of this LiveView. Once you have that, it feels a little less overwhelming. And still, even though with that knowledge, it still sometimes feels like back-end debugging for front-end problems. But it's doable. And in general, with Elixir, it's a smaller ecosystem, but it's growing. With the solid core and strong community libraries, it's not as vast as Clojure, especially for niche tools. and domains outside of web and real-time apps. So you're going to dig into you may dig into the Erlang libraries more, or use newer libraries that may or may not been as tested as much as you want them to be, or you might roll your own. So if Elixir is so great, why would anybody want to use Clojure to make web apps? Well, I think there are several compelling reasons. The main one to me is the composable data-centric architecture or approach. You take small focused libraries and build what you want to build. That's how I started in the beginning. I started with Clojure, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to use Datomic too. I'm going to go all in. And if you're not aware already, Datomic is an immutable transactional database that records all facts, so you have built-in historical insights. It's amazing. I might not have needed it for my Fabric app, but dang it, I wanted to use that schema. I wanted to write it down. I was so proud of that. But then I was like, oh man, I have to think about what other libraries I need to, and what do I need to get this web app out in the world so that my dreams come true. So I actually ended up using a little-known Clojure framework called Coast to make my web app dreams come true. But now I see I could have just stuck with what I was being told and what I was reading about. Pure functions, manipulating data. We can make it work. So for example, one cool thing I'm thinking about, Hiccup, the way you write, a popular way to write each HTML. Do you see anything interesting on these definitions for how that HTML is written? It's in a vector, or sometimes it's going to be a map. Can you think about how amazing, if you're not already familiar with Clojure, how amazing it would be to pass around your data with persistent data structures? And let's add a little ring handler on top of that. And let's evaluate a server, this server pipeline function. And I would say, and just like that, we have HTML rendered on the page. It can be as easy as that if you want it to be. So looking back now, I kind of thought of this on a plane here from America on my way to Sao Paulo. I thought it's interesting. I started with Clojure, and I was hesitant. I shied away from rolling my own stack, and I ended up using that framework that I talked about. And then I went and totally changed languages and ecosystems and used like the mega big awesome framework. And through that, I learned more about programming, and with my small team, just learned more and gained knowledge. And then I get to a place where I feel like now I can build the kick-ass web stack with Clojure of my dreams. So I know this was a light overview, but I hope there was something here today that maybe piqued your interest, that you may have heard about a little before, but you want to look into further. So I asked you, what did you discover today? What are you going to go look up when you get home, or later today, or whatever? So I'd be happy to answer your questions. I'll do my best. If you don't get to talk to you today, feel free to reach out to me online. I would love to connect with you. Find me in the hallway. I'll be here. I'm ending a little early, so we'll have more time for questions, it seems. So thank you very much.
All right.